Hey, welcome to Filler. I'm Joe.
And I'm Steve.
And this is the place we talk about things that fill our cups as creatives and as people. How are you doing, Steve?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm just sitting here drinking a flat seltzer that I left out overnight. And wow, that's all I got. Huh?
What are your thoughts on flat seltzer? Because I do the same thing, but I'm curious what you think about it.
I think it wouldn't bother me if I didn't know what it was supposed to be. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's just like a flavored water, and that's fine.
Gotcha.
But you know what it should be.
Interesting. So I'm drinking a Canada Dry seltzer water original. Do you hear that, Spindrift? A Canada Dry. And there are times where I leave my seltzer water out overnight, and I wake up and I'm just like, I'm jonesing for that first bit of hydration. So before I can fill up my glass of water, I'll just like polish back whatever seltzer was left overnight. And room temperature, semi-flat seltzer water, 7 out of 10. Not terrible. Yeah, I don't hate it, and I don't know why, because I agree with you. Knowing what it could be makes it so much worse, but still having it, I don't mind.
It's like how I firmly believe that hot coffee that has gotten cold feels colder than iced coffee.
Yeah, it's also that's similar to the sensation where you take a bite out of something and you're expecting one flavor and you get hit with another.
Oh, yeah. Like you think you're going to drink water and then it's milk and you're like, whoa.
Right. Or you take a bite out of a grape or pop a grape in your mouth and you're like, oh, I'm jonesing for that sweet grape flavor. And then it's like bitter or sour and you're like, oh.
Wow, that was just 2 straight minutes of nothing.
Well, thank God we have an hour and change of a lot then, because we are talking about Daytripper by Fábio Moon and Gabriel. This is a Vertigo graphic novel that was originally published as 10 separate issues. Being from Vertigo, which is known for very boundary-pushing books like Preacher, Why the Last Man, Hellblazer, V for Vendetta, Swamp Thing, all those big ones, and more. It is a story that is going to make you feel things, going to make you think new things, maybe challenge your beliefs, maybe make you uncomfortable. But ultimately, it is not a typical kind of big two Marvel DC book where you're like getting superheroes doing superhero crap and the soap opera drama of it all, you know? Mm-hmm. Like I said, it is a 10-issue graphic novel. It was published as such, which a lot of things nowadays aren't. They are announced as miniseries, usually 5 to 6 issues, something that could like fill up a graphic novel's worth. And if sales are good on those issues, then they become ongoing, or then they become maxi series, maybe for like 12 or something. So it kind of sucks, but mostly nowadays, comics that are published, at least again by Big Two, their length is decided by their sales, which to some extent I get, because it is like a capitalist driven publishing industry.
Right.
But story-wise, it really sucks if the authors have something to say. Fortunately, Moon and Ba have something to say, and they got to say everything they wanted to say.
It seems like it. It seems like a complete story on its own, like in its form.
Yeah, I think it's a weird story. I thought it was a weird story when I first picked it up years ago. I don't know how many years ago I first read it. If I remember correctly, it was published in 2011, but I did not read it when it was coming out in single issues. I had picked it up as a graphic novel when I was living on Long Island when I first got into comics. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure I just saw it in my comic shop in Oceanside, and I had just finished reading Preacher, and I asked the guy, I was like, hey, is this a good thing? Like, I just finished this Vertigo one. Is this another good Vertigo? And they were like, yeah, it's going to fuck you up. And I was like, sign me up. So this book is very existentialist, which I personally hate as a philosophy. I find it frustrating, even though I think it's supposed to be wholesome ultimately and welcoming. I think existentialism like really borders on nihilism. And once I'm in nihilist territory, I just look into the void and there it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel that this was existential in a bad way?
No. And I'm kind of surprised to hear you say that, because you've said this is like your favorite graphic novel.
It is. It is untouchably my favorite graphic novel. I hope someday
so that's wild.
Challenges it. Yeah.
Yeah, because this is extremely existential. I think it could go one of two ways, of either very hopeful or very nihilistic. And this, I would say, has an ultimately hopeful message with a very morose theme that keeps coming throughout, which, I mean, I guess dealing with death is kind of par for the course with existentialism, but the way they do it in this really threw me for a loop for the first couple chapters. And I didn't even look at the back cover. You just gave me a copy, which was very generous. Thank you. And I was just like, I'm not going to look at anything. I'm just going to open this and see what happens. Like, I read the intro with the drawing of the twins.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, here we go. Which I'm very glad that I did that, because I had no idea what to expect. And it was, it reminded me a lot of The Sculptor by Scott McCloud, which I kind of also found in a similar way. I was living in LA and I had a bunch of friends that were into comics, and just saw this one, and I recognized Scott's name from the Understanding Comics book that I had from him. But I had never read any of his actual work, of his like fiction work. So I picked it up, read that whole thing in a day, cried my eyes out, and let you borrow it as you gave me this copy of Daytripper. And I'm like, you know what? This is a good trade. Like, these are very compatible books.
I'm looking forward to reading it. Maybe not right away, having just finished reading this again today.
Yeah, no, read something really stupid and mindless next.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to need a break.
So with all of that prologue there, we are going to run through the 10 chapters. Some we might dive deeper into than others, but we'll talk about the ins and the outs, the structure, the artistry, the writing, everything. I should say we are going full spoilers on what is a 14-year-old, 15-year-old comic. So if you want to be like Steve and go get the comic and read it first and jump in, perhaps that's the preferred way to do it. It sounds like you would say it is, Steve. You like that?
I would, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say we give it our full recommendation. It's Joe's favorite of all time. So if you trust his opinion and my willingness to just jump into things blind and be pleasantly surprised, then go read it and come back and listen to this, because you can't talk about this without getting into spoilers.
Right. And I do want to say, before we get into that nitty gritty, that I think that comics still have a negative connotation in terms of being not quote unquote real literature. And Daytripper, like, this is real literature, like very much so. Like, this is more real literature than some of the crap that I read that is like 300 pages, 400 pages long. So if you're a person who says like, oh, I don't really read comics, that they're for kids, or they're stupid, or they're mindless, or like, I'm just looking at pictures, I might as well just watch a movie or television, I implore you to give this a try, because I think it's going to change your mind about comics.
It works so well within the medium for pacing and surprises as you turn the page, and even some surprising things that work together of the issues being compiled into a graphic novel, just seeing what the next insert art for the next chapter is going to be, has some unintentional effects that I can get into in one specific chapter break that we just, between this and The Sculptor, or I mean, if you want a superhero take that's like not just good guys punching bad guys, Watchmen, you know, or The Killing Joke. Yeah, the comics are great, and I'm a novice with this, so let's get into it.
So chapter 1 is called 32. Do you know what the number was before reading this chapter?
I guessed it was his age.
His age? Okay. What gave you that inclination?
He looked 32.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's enough.
But also somehow I think just the fact that it says chapter 1, like the word 1, and then the number. I think something about that clued me, and then I was like, okay, I have to pay attention to the number.
Yeah.
I think that made it pretty clear right away.
Great. That's good. So that's like some of the major stuff that I tell my students when I teach comics. I usually get the chance to teach Persepolis in school. And a lot of the times I tell them, or I try to tell them every year I teach it, that you are going to have to read between the lines in comics because there's information that's being given to you in the dialogue boxes, in the thought bubbles, in the narration, but also in like the literal images is information. And you saying he looks 32 gives you the idea that the chapter's title comes from his age. Like, that's good. That's part of it. And I think that's very economical writing off the bat. And that's something that Daytripper excels with. Okay. So it opens with this kind of semi-prologue because we don't get to Brass right away, our main character. We see these people who feel like they could be real-world figures. Like the painter Shlomo Lerner, which is an awesome, not real painter name.
Yeah.
Who paints only images of women he slept with, and they're all called Lola. It's just, there's so much character work done in that one thing about a character, Shlomo, that doesn't matter and isn't real, but will come back up again later in the book. And I love that because it feels like it sets up the world of magical realism that Moon and Ba are trying to do. Because in magical realism, which might be my favorite genre on any given day with speculative fiction and cosmic horror, I think giving these feelings that we are in the real world, but not necessarily our real world, is what makes it magical, where it says, okay, like, you're familiar with this place, but it's a little askew or it's a little different. And because it's a little different things can happen, but it doesn't make it any less real or true. And so that's how I felt this prologue set it up, both the first time I read it and again. Like, going into it, I was like, I kind of sort of started to remember right away what happens. And it's with this prologue that I remembered it.
And it hits you because this prologue is the obituaries of multiple people. That we find out right away are all written by this main character, Brass, who is an obituary writer, which is such an interesting thing for a protagonist to be, because it's such a trope of like the protagonist being a writer, but an obituary writer, you don't hear that a lot. That's pretty unique. And what are the implications of that immediately? Like, oh, this guy has to think about death all the time. Tells you a lot right away. And speaking to that point about the medium and turning the page, right on the first page, we see the reveal of Brass is him like looking shocked. And you see this like little bit of red at the bottom of his torso. And you're like, what's going on? Then you flip the page and you see that he's at a murder scene and his suit is covered in blood. And that's a great hook right away to be like, oh, we're getting in the middle of this right now. Like, can't wait to see where this is going.
I feel like all of my favorite stories start in medias res because it is the author saying to the audience, I trust that you're going to figure out what's going on, even though right now it doesn't make sense. But I trust you can do it because you're trusting me by reading this or watching it in the first place. So establishing that trust, I'm like, yeah, let's mess around. Let's have some fun, right, with the author. And so Brass is an obituary writer, like you said. We are on the day of his 32nd birthday. And what he's waiting for is acknowledgement from his father, Benedito, who is a famous and renowned author himself. Brass never receives that acknowledgement. He never gets that happy birthday from his father. And this is just the first instance of what is going to be kind of the heart of this novel is the disconnect between him and his father because he thinks he's being neglected by his dad.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking because Bras takes that lack of acknowledgement and kind of turns it in on himself.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that it's like it's clear he just hates himself because his parents didn't love him well enough. And that's not Bras's fault.
Yeah.
And the way they depict his parents, quote unquote, not loving him enough, it's not abusive, it's not rude, it's not mean, it's just kind of forgetful or thoughtless.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what makes it all the worse for me, that there's nothing truly terrible or traumatic in their relationship. It's just
kind of a dull discontent.
Yeah, which starts this whole vibe of it and kind of settles into Bras, which hurts him all the more for his purpose and hurts him all the more for his direction in life, which is going to trickle down into the other chapters as we move through it.
Yeah, and I think something interesting about how things are set up in the beginning of this book is there's a lot of very well-paced exposition that's not too on the nose, but there's quite a few tropes that if I had just read this first issue, I probably would have thought was a little hacky, but it all ends up working. Like, for example, he's a writer. Yeah, he's an obituary writer, but he's a writer. Very common thing for a protagonist to be. He's got a cool black best friend, and they're like, remember that trip to Salvador? And then you find out that, like, yeah, that's where he met a girl that he dated for 7 years. Like, of course he remembers the trip. But again, all of these things get fully fleshed out as the book goes on. How writing connects Bras to his father and how Jorge's full arc plays out, and that the next chapter is seeing the Salvador trip in the past. All of these things play with your expectations. So every time you think you know what's happening, something gets turned on its head and reveals a new truth. And that really starts with how this chapter ends.
So they go to a bar, or rather, I'm sorry, Bras goes to a bar, right? Mm-hmm. He is on his way to his father's speech. He's given this big major speech, and he stops in for a drink first. And he goes to this guy's bar, and he really just wants a pack of cigarettes, but he gets a drink. And he's talking to the bartender, and the bar's name is the name of the bartender's father.
Yeah.
And so Bras says to him, why don't you call it your place? Why don't you put your name on the place? And he goes, well, it'd still be his bar and I would still be his son, which is the first hint of this major theme that's going to come up about how you really can't escape family or your father and the traits of your parent and whatnot, if you want to be more specific about it to this text. But that's the first time that it shows up. In the middle of this heartfelt sequence where Bras is about to go to his dad, it seems like he made some peace thanks to this bartender giving bartenderly advice. The bartender's, I think it's his cousin, shows up.
Nephew.
His nephew shows up needing money. And he holds up the bar. And in holding up the bar, he shoots his uncle and he shoots Bras. And that is the end of chapter 1.
Yep. It ends with an obituary written about Bras. And we're like, oh shit, he just dies in the first chapter?
On his birthday, no less.
On his birthday. Like, they said, like Shakespeare, he died on his birthday. I think they say that in the obituary, which like kind of insult to injury because he wanted to be a bigger writer than he was.
Yep.
And then now we're like, okay, so we know when he dies. And chapter 2 is called 21. And we see that he's on the Salvador trip with his friend Jorge. And we're like, okay, so now I have to go through this story knowing how it ends.
Supposedly.
Yeah, feeling the tragedy of knowing that he's going to die at the age of 32 in 11 years. That makes me sad. So I guess they're really just going to take me through his life and see why I should care even more knowing that he's going to die. At least that's what I thought. but we will get to that.
We are in Salvador in chapter 2, and they are 21. We're following Jorge and Bras, who I have to say, I love Jorge. I think he's a fantastic character. I love Bras. I love all the characters in this, but I think Jorge might be my favorite. Mm-hmm. Even when we get to Jorge's chapter, I think that kind of even solidifies Jorge as my favorite character, in spite of what occurs in those events. But what I love about chapter 2 opening is that we're on a boat and there's a naked woman on the boat and she's talking to Bras, but also she's kind of talking to us. And so before we get further into this, I feel like I should put the declaration out that while I might be 85% fluent in Spanish, my accent remains gringo. So we don't know it right now, but that woman is the Yemanja.
I think it's Yemanja because I've seen that it can also be spelled with a Y instead of an I at the start. So I think it's Yemanja.
We don't know it right then and there, but that's who that is. I think the way they open this chapter is to make it feel like it's that dream girl that Bras is with or gets with in Salvador in this chapter. And I just love the magical realism of it because it can kind of be both.
Yeah.
Really. When you look back on it and you're like, oh yeah, that's Yemanja. But at the same time, that could be Olinda too. So you kind of play it with both.
And it's interesting because we know in chapter 1 that he's got a partner named Anna that he's talking to his mom about. So we're like, so who are these people? Like, if he's going to end up with someone named Anna at the end, like, then what is this going to have to do with anything? We will see.
It's just very all over the place. And I love that it's all over the place because the art is so beautiful and the writing is so reflective and patient and poignant and engaging, I guess, that you're like, all right, just keep going. I'm getting a good story out of it, even if I don't fully understand what's happening. Jorge and Bras are in Salvador and they're hanging out. And we get really, really existential in this one. I think this is where we start to break into the existential bubble.
Yeah. And
it's Jorge who does it, which is part of why he's my favorite. As we go through it, I'm going to be naming some of my favorite lines just because they really hit on some of the thematic themes that I love. But he says, the Bras and he are having some drinks. And Bras is very funny. It's not my fault. They all think I'm a foreigner because he's about to get taken for on the street for some money by a kid selling something.
Right.
And Jorge points at his wrist, already gotten caught by the kid, clearly showing that he was taken for. And he goes, well, we are foreigners here. And between the two of them, like you said, Jorge's the person of color or the clearly presenting person of color. When they say we're all foreigners here, they're talking about humanity. They're talking about us, like, just not knowing how to get through life. And in the way that the bartender in chapter 1 starts hitting on those themes of family, saying, well, the nephew says you can't choose your family, but the bartender says, like, you still got to accept your family for who it is. Jorge's saying you kind of got to accept we're all a little strange. We're all a little weird. We all really don't fit in here. And that's where I'm just like, yeah, I'm fully in on Jorge and on whatever is about to happen. I don't care. Anything can happen. And I don't care that it doesn't make sense.
So when he meets this girl, Olinda, again, knowing that he's going to die in 11 years makes it all the more tragic that he meets this girl in this, like, beautiful way that she seems, full of life and interesting and, like, is immediately breaking down just kind of how to live simply and, like, live in the moment and look beyond the things that we think define us as people, like our careers. And she looks at Jorge and says, like, she can tell by the fact that he's taking pictures of things that interest him for no reason that that's who he is. That's telling her more than just saying, oh, what do you do for work could ever tell you about a person. And she just has this very different mindset than he does. And I could see this teetering on like a manic pixie dream girl kind of thing where, like, oh, the boring guy is being taught about life by the amazing girl that he meets. But it plays with that 2. And we see that more in the next chapter.
I was going to say, I do have commentary on the Manic Pixie Dream Girl stuff, but it is more fitting for chapter 3, I think.
Okay, cool. Because something very important happens at the end of this chapter. Why don't you start describing it? Because I was kind of unclear.
Good.
And this is me with my inexperience with reading comics.
Yes.
It was kind of hard to determine what exactly was happening in these last few panels.
Awesome. Okay, so I think, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit because you said the Manic Pixie Dream Girl thing. This is the first chapter where I start to think that this feels like I'm watching a really, really good movie, the way they transition from scene to scene between panels, especially where Brass meets Olinda and they go to the market. The next panel on the page turn, it feels like an indie movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's on purpose and of the time. But it's just like, I'm very surprised how we don't have a movie or a TV series out of this because it's basically already storyboarded. And it's perfectly set up. You just got to follow what they created. Okay. So he and Olinda do get together and they have this whirlwind romance. But they are celebrating the feast of the Yamanha that night, which is a real thing. So again, this is the magical realist moment. Like, this is a thing that happens in Salvador. And people go and do what Olinda does in this, where she makes a wish and she puts the dolls, clearly representing her and Brass together, because she ties them together, and she sets them out to sea. And so I looked up into this, and what people do is they put their wish out to sea. And if the wish, however they represent it, does not wash up on the shore, then Yamanha has accepted their wish and it will come true. If it washes up, that means the wish has been rejected. So she sends out the dolls. Brass goes out and he meets someone who has this kind of ghostly figure about him on a boat.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like an old man. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the old man finds, now this is us nearing those last final panels that you're referring to. The old man and Brass are on the boat and they're kind of far out from shore, but not terribly far. And the old man says, "We're here." And Brass says, "Well, what about her?" Holding up the 2 dolls still tied together. The old man takes the 2 dolls and he says, "You are not one, not like this." He unties them. "You are 2. It is time." And the old man puts the dolls back in the water, supposedly to let them float or wherever, however it might be. In the same panel he's putting them back over, Brass leans over, and it looks like he's putting down another one of the wishes into the water from the boat. Another panel later, the old man is sitting up in the boat. We see Brass's hands putting that basket down that has the dolls in it into the water. They float away. It looks like some time passes. Then the old man stands on the boat alone. There's an insert panel of bubbles. And on the page turn, we're at the shore where we see all those boats that Brass and the old man and others were on from afar. And only Olinda's doll washes up on the shore, suggesting that her wish was not granted by Yamanha. But Brass's doll isn't there, just like him, because what happens is he drowns.
Yeah.
But he drowns off panel. He drowns in the oddest way because we don't know if the old man kills him by pushing him over. We don't know if Brass, upon having this conversation with the old man where he says, "You are not 2, that's not it. You were 1 each," or "You were not 1, you were 2. So does Brass kill him in this like lovelorn moment that he just loses it? We don't get any of that. Instead, we just get this note in the obituary. Every year, the number of drowning victims during the festivities increases, as does the number of children conceived in the sands of Salvador, evidencing that Yamanha can give life as well as take it away. He was 21.
And that's where I was like, wait, what? Because we just saw him die at 32.
Okay.
But he drowned here.
So what are you thinking at this point then?
I don't know what to think. I'm like, what? Like, this is one of those moments where I'm like, I got to just go along for the ride and see what happens, because I don't understand how he dies at 2 different times.
Right.
But the next chapter starts to kind of make it make sense, or at least you get into the rhythm of what this book really is.
Okay. You thought the next chapter made sense with Olinda being in the panel, crying, upset, talking to him?
I mean, very early on, it says, like, she calls him a piece of shit and walks out of his life and says, like, I can't believe I wasted 7 years on you.
Yep.
And the chapter is called 28. So it has been 7 years since this. And I'm like, wait a minute. So he died, but I guess that's not canon because everything that happens in the chapter except him dying happens. And then we just keep going. And that was very confusing to me. But the bigger takeaway is, like, knowing that this was a mini series or a short series of issues, I can't imagine being one of the readers, like, waiting for the next issue. And after this, like, lovely and sweet but low-key cursed start to a romance, the very next issue, it starts with her cursing him out and leaving him.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a shock, and that I actually think might say something about playing with the trope of the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, because they've both gotten older over the last 7 years. They've both changed and they're growing apart and stuff. Just like how the MPDG trope is a very naive one. And we all kind of outgrow it. You know, we all kind of like move on from this very simplistic, overly romantic thought that some other person is going to give you the key to life and you're just going to, like, your love will last forever because they've made you into a complete person. But then she just leaves. So it's like, okay, so they've outgrown each other. This is much more grounded in reality than you'd think for something where a character dies more than once.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I like your use of the word canon, because I think that became much more colloquially accepted after Spider-Verse became such a big pop culture phenomenon.
The canon events, yeah.
Right. Reading it this time, again, I knew vaguely what was going to happen. I actually forgot the end of the story as a whole, but I vaguely was remembering things as it all came back together. So on this read through, the first thing I remembered, or the first thing I realized, was that the chapter titles are not just his age, but they are the age that he dies.
Yeah.
It's not just the snapshot of him at that point in life. So in chapter 1, he was 32, and in chapter 2, he's 21. And us as the audience thinks, oh, we're just getting a flashback to lead up to his death.
Yeah.
But then we get the twist that he dies again at the end of chapter 2. Mm-hmm. So there's this disconnect there. And I think at the end of chapter 2, that's where I understand, okay, he dies whatever the age is going forward, which is true. And they maintain that for the rest of the series. What I picked up on this go round more immediately, and it was the start of this chapter, is that I think it is what you're saying, that everything is true up until the death. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's in terms of canon where this is the set thing that happens to him.
Yeah.
I don't think it's in terms of, like, we're going to go like full stupid MCU because they had to do this and destroy everyone's brains for several years. It's not like a multiverse thing where there's several different Brosses, you know? Yeah. This is all the same Bros, and this is all the same family that he has. But these are all just different potential lines of where his story ended. Mm-hmm. And so in chapter 1, it ends at 32. In chapter 2, it ends at 21. Chapter 3, it ends at 28. But everything that happened when he was 21 is true up until this age of 28's death. Mm-hmm. Everything that happens to him in chapter 3 is true in chapter 1 up through 32. Yeah. So it's recursive. Like, they kind of repeat and add on to the story bits and pieces as they go through. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, the twins were very, very smart by making him 76 in chapter 10. By placing him at his oldest at the end of the graphic novel, we have his whole life story by that point.
Yes.
And it doesn't really matter how he died, just that he dies. And he learns a little bit differently in each death. And via him, the reader, the audience, learns a little bit differently about life through his death.
Yeah. And I think at this, especially by the end of chapter 3, not to get into the plot of it, but I'd say that this is where I start to theorize, like, is each death supposed to be the end of who he was as a person at that time or age? Are these alternate timelines? Because multiverse brain rot. But and who's writing these obituaries? Is anybody? Is this just being like imagined? Is God writing it? Like what is this? Like, it's never clear what details are canon and where the cutoff is for what story beats carry over to the next chronological chapter. But the deaths, my theory at this point is that this is just the end of a stage of his life, and that he's about to enter into something new and be reborn, I guess you could say. So I'm just keeping that in the back of my mind as we go forward.
I like that reading. I don't think either time that I've read it, because I've only read it twice, it's because I find this to be a difficult read emotionally for me. Mm-hmm. Despite it being my favorite graphic novel, it's just hard for me. I don't ever engage with this on the level that you're engaging with it. So I appreciate your point of view, because I think you like the theorizing and you like trying to puzzle it out. Whereas I go like, and that's not to say that you don't, but I go into things like Lynch mode, where I'm like, I don't really know what's happening, but I'm going to feel my way through whatever is happening to kind of discern for me whatever. While I enjoy the conversations of trying to figure stuff out, ultimately they're less important.
Yeah, and that's what's cool about magical realism. And I can feel my not skepticism, but my like analytical side, like combating with my artistic, because yes, there's art in trying to understand the deeper meaning of something, but sometimes you just gotta go with it. And sometimes stuff is weird for the sake of being weird, like a Lynch thing you've said. And so that's what I think is really interesting about reading this, is the more you try to dig into it, the more you can feel yourself going like, who fucking cares? Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't all have to mean something, because the whole point is not to be obsessed with death. It's challenging you by constantly showing you death and showing this guy that you've come to love as you see his whole life dying over and over again, often in very violent ways. And everything that matters is happening in his life. That's so cool. And it gives you a hook and plays with your expectations that as you get further in it, you just get more and more like, oh man, what's going to happen to him now?
Right. It almost becomes a little cartoonish in like Kenny from South Park kind of way, where like South Park starts and you're like, how's Kenny going to die today? You know, like, that Brass has to die now by the end of each chapter, and you're just waiting for the shoe to drop, which I think is really, really good by desensitizing the audience to his death, that you're just like, he's going to die. It's part of the story, which is kind of what they're saying. Before we go to chapter 4, to note the manic pixie dream girlness of Olinda and Brass. Some plot stuff that I did want to talk about in this one is how they break up, and Brass goes through this like whole like depressive episode until he finds this girl that he sees in a market who is Anna, and we know it's Anna, even though it doesn't say it just yet. I don't think it says her name in this one, right?
No,
but you get the feeling that she's important, because he even says in the narration, "Oh, I'm going to marry her." Yeah, like there's this importance to her, and this chapter gave me the same feeling as the end of 500 Days of Summer, where Tom and Summer are officially done. He's gotten his closure, and the minute he gets his closure, we're changing seasons, and he goes to autumn, and he smirks. And so, first of all, it's like maintaining that like indie feel of the
very
movies,
much,
right? It is doubling down on like that manic pixie dream girl stage of life, like you were saying, and then moving past it. But this might be messed up of me, but I'm just thinking of this because 500 Days of Summer is still fresh enough in my mind. I think Brass dying here, even though we know he has to die, his dying here works so much better on a plot level than Tom's smirk works in the movie.
Yeah, you really hate that smirk.
I really hate that smirk. And we belabored it to like no end. But this feels like this feels like the opposite of a Deus Ex Machina. You know, it's just like, it's not solved. The rug gets pulled out from underneath him. Like he gets his happy ending. Like he's going to go chase after this girl. He realizes it. He has to go get the girl of his dreams. And then we're like waiting for him to die. And the minute you see him in the street and he's running and he's not looking and there's a green light in the panel and you turn the page and there's the thunk.
Yep.
I was happy he got hit, because if he didn't get hit, I'd be like, what are you learning from what happened with Olinda? Like, you're just going to do the same crap again. You're living your life for someone else, or having someone else ascribe meaning to your own life instead of finding it on your own or learning what it's supposed to be on your own.
That's a good way of looking at it, but I would say I have a different take, because I think in this context, it's kind of different than 500 Days of Summer, because he snaps out of his depression by seeing Anna, where in 500 Days, Tom has to like grow and get his closure separately. So he's in a place that can accept, like mentally, where he can accept Autumn. He can accept meeting her. I think his death here this is what clued me into the pattern that like maybe each death represents the end of a time in his life, because it's marking this change that he has, that he's suddenly like excited about something that he feels like he just saw his true partner in life. Which, say what you want about like how real that is, or if you can ever be lucky enough to have that kind of love in your life that you just know from like love at first sight, but it does mark the end of one phase as he enters into what his life is going to be with Anna.
Yeah.
And I don't know. But that's what's so great about this, is that there are multiple ways to take it, and they're all valid, really.
Yeah.
And when you're writing a story that's existential about life, you're kind of going to put what you think about life into it.
So in that next stage of life, he's 41 in chapter 4, and he's running back and forth in those first two panels. And I didn't even need to see Anna pregnant in the third to know that they were rushing to the hospital.
Yep.
Which, again, is the awesome cartoon storytelling that they got going. Because you've seen this image a million times in movies and TV, where the man is running with all the bags and he's hurried and he's flushed. And it's like, oh, his wife's about to give birth.
Yep.
Right? So she's about to give birth. And so I noticed in this chapter that the last two started with former loves of a previous life, or a previous potential life. And so on this reading, I was like, oh, that's a new motif that you're kind of making up. Like, you're taking a kernel from each of the previous chapters and running with it.
Yeah.
Which is like kind of Cloud Atlas-y in a cool way. You know? They go to the hospital, and while they're at the hospital, she is in the middle of I guess in between contractions. So like the birth is on the way, but not just there yet. And he has to go back and forth. And as he's leaving the hospital to go get something, he sees his mother, who previously left a voicemail while they were rushing out the door about his father who passed away.
Yeah.
I guess to just straight up get it out of the way, in this issue, their son Miguel is born.
Yeah.
And the day Miguel is born is the day that Bras's father dies. I love the symmetry that they play with here.
Yeah.
It's as though to really double down on that feeling of not being able to choose your family, and how your family impacts you, and how a father impacts a son, impacts a grandson, and so on and so forth. I'm getting this cool feeling like you can't have too many men in the family because there's not enough room for it, because you're going to trickle down, or that person's traits and behaviors are going to trickle down anyway.
Yeah.
So you don't even, like, I know that Bras has his grandfather, but Miguel doesn't even really need his, because Benedito is so deeply ingrained in Bras, no matter how much he hates it. And we know he hates it in the way that he smokes his cigarettes, and in the way that he's an author. But we don't need Benedito. We actually need the lack of Benedito, which I think is a very, very awesome choice to have here.
Yes. So it's like tragic irony of like, one generation dying as another is starting, but it works for a couple other reasons. Like, for one, Bras spends most of this chapter going back and forth between helping his mom and helping his wife.
Mhm.
And, you know, when he finds out from his mom that his dad just died, he's got to go back to his wife, and she's in a moment of peace right now between contractions, and he's got to make the choice to tell her, oh, I saw my mom, my dad's sick. He doesn't say dead. He said, like, I didn't want to bring her down in this moment. And, you know, something you learn really early in writing is that choices define characters, just like choices define people. And I think this is a solid choice for looking into Bras's mind and heart, that he cares about other people, especially the people he's close to. But the really big thing here is kind of like what you said, that as Bras becomes a father himself, his own father dies, explicitly showing that he, Bras, is no longer the boy looking to an older, wiser man for guidance, but instead needs to be that for someone else. And that comes back in a very clear way at the end.
So he has to go to his mother's and father's house. And while he's there, he goes into his father's study where he spends the majority of his time writing. And there's this beautiful line where Bras says he wasn't there and yet he was everywhere. It's where it has that lived in feeling of the person. And it's just beautiful the way they do that. Like, you want to cry right away. We get the revelation that Bras becomes a novelist just to be a part of his father's world. So being a writer is in his bones and his blood and whatnot. And he doesn't want to be an obituary writer, but it's what comes to him. But he genuinely wants to be a novelist to connect to his father. We see Bras's novel sitting on his father's desk,
which is our first time ever even seeing it.
Yes. And it's awesome because it's such a great breadcrumb that will matter way later when we get to it. And it has the best literary thriller title, Silken Eyes, which is like such a fun way to say it. But Bras is there, and in that revelation of knowing that his father's heart has stopped beating, Bras has a heart attack.
Yep.
Because he hits that moment of epiphany where he's no longer the son, he is now the father, and he can't handle it. And he himself has a heart attack and keels over in the exact same spot. And Miguelito doesn't have a dad.
Following in your daddy's shadow right till the end, huh, you Nepo baby.
So,
but no, I think this further supports my theory, actually, that it's the end of a stage in his life, because now he's becoming a father. Like, that's a new beginning for him. So old Bras, the son, is dead. Bras, the father, is who he is now. But something important to bring up about this chapter, and this is handled so well, is that we get the first real glimpse of why Bras kind of hates his dad. And it's because he has a secret half-sister. Now, we are not told this outright.
no.
Like, we get a flashback to the moment he met her that he remembers from when he sees her at his funeral, at Benedito's funeral. You can just see it on his face as he sees Benedito talking to her, and she's uncomfortable, and she like makes her way out very quickly. He just looks skeptical and a little angry, and all wordlessly, he's just kind of dealing with the fact that he's just realized something that changes how he sees his father.
Yeah.
And none of it has to actually be told. It's just drawn. And that is some beautiful respect for the audience that not everyone does, because if this were fully explained, it would just be so much cheaper. It would be like taken for more of like a shock of like announcing, oh, this is your half sister. The shame I feel. Like, it's, thank God they didn't do it that way. They just let us figure it out. And that colors everything, because up until this point, anytime we've seen Bras and Benedito together, because they have had a conversation where he's been very like supportive and wise to Bras, you're kind of wondering, like, why is he just jealous? Like, is he just pissy that he doesn't have his father's success? No, there's something deeply human that has disappointed him about his father, and now we get to see what it is.
I like that you said this chapter solidifies or reinforces your theory that it's ending the stage of his life to enter the next one. Because you would anticipate or expect that the next chapter then is what he's like as an older father or a husband later in life, but rather we get him when he's 11.
Yep.
And the minute I saw 11 as the title, I was kind of aghast because I knew that this was like, we're entering the real extreme tragedy of Daytripper. Because remember, he has to die.
Yeah, so we got to see a little boy die.
Yeah, and you have to read this entire issue and fall in love with little Brass, the little miracle.
The little miracle.
And you do fall in love with him because they are excellent storytellers. And he still dies. They're still committing to it. Which is amazing. It is fantastic. Again, like you said, respect for the audience. They are not going to break their own rule. They set up the structure and they're owning it. So this one, we got to start with some levity. I loved so much that little Brass goes out to his father who's sitting by a tree. And he goes, Dad, why do we have to take a shit in the woods if we have a bathroom in the house? And his dad's smoking under a tree. He goes, can't you see I'm writing? And then the next panel is a journal with blank pages. And it's just such a great joke because as writers, yep, he's writing because he's sitting there and he's like figuring out the story in his head or whatever he wants to write. And he's just not doing it yet. But like the thinking is the writing, which I saw Dogma with my sister a couple weeks ago.
Oh, great
and
movie.
Kevin Smith was saying how he's quote unquote writing the script for Dogma 2. He's cracking it. And he goes, let me be clear. That doesn't mean I'm sitting at my computer typing something out. He says that means I'm driving and I'm stuck in traffic in California. And I'm like, what would Jay do here? Oh, that's what he would do. And he would like figure out character beats so that later on when he goes to sit down and type it or write it out, he has written the story in his head and he's really just transcribing it for others to read.
Right.
I just thought that was a great insight onto how writers work because I feel like we get a bad rap for looking like we're not working when in fact we're like way too thoughtful and empathetic. And it's like, please don't talk to me. I'm thinking too much about everything right now.
I also love that at the end of this scene, after he imparts some wisdom to little Brass, he finally goes, oh, and watch your language.
Yes. Yeah.
Like the first thing he says to his dad is, why do we have to take a shit in the woods? And it's not until after he's imparted his guru advice that he's just like, oh yeah, and don't swear.
So he's a good dad. Like that's the thing.
He
like,
is a good dad.
He's a
good writer because he's in the zone.
Right. I love this chapter because I am not a person who comes from a big family. I have small nuclear family who is not the tightest. So seeing this, especially now that I'm like much more in an accepting and better place with my familial relationships, it's very nice to look into what it's like to be in a huge family.
Yeah.
And in a nice way, because I know that there's shit that comes with it. There's always baggage with everything. But it's really nice to see it from a kid's point of view because I didn't get to have this experience. But seeing how he's running around and playing, and there's that whole scene that introduces everyone in the family. And it says, oh, and the kids, first, second, and third removed cousins. It was too many people, too many names. And I was like, I've never had that experience where I couldn't remember all of my family members' names.
I have. I've been to a bunch of family gatherings and like I come from two big Italian families and it's a lot of people. And especially for a kid, like they nailed that for a kid that it's like,
nice.
It's too many names. It's like, I'm supposed to know you and call you family. Like, I can't even keep it all straight, but they keep showing how nice it is that they keep coming up to the grandparents' ranch and they take the time to all sit and eat together, especially when it rains. It forces them to all be in the house together and be close. It's really beautiful. Something else that really connected with me was this is where we start to really learn about why Brass is called the Miracle. The whole story that his mom Aurora keeps telling is that he was born during a blackout, and I think he wasn't breathing at first, and then eventually he came to, something like that. And when the lights came back on, he was awake and his eyes shone like he was cutting through the darkness or something like that. But it's just put it in his head that he's special.
Yeah.
And as a former gifted kid myself, like gifted student,
Yeah.
that fucks with you a little bit.
Yeah,
You know,
it
it
does.
creates expectations of your own assured success
Yeah.
that makes mediocrity very hard to deal with. And that makes a lot of sense as we see Ross struggling through his 20s and 30s to be as successful of a writer as his father is, or any kind of author, because all he's doing right now is writing obituaries that he doesn't feel any creative fulfillment from.
Yeah. My sister and I have talked a lot about this, not necessarily Daytripper itself, but about this idea of being a quote unquote special kid or gifted or exceptional, whatever the term is, however your school used it, that kind of student where things come easy to you. You're smart, right? Like all these things that look good and that adults make kids feel like it is the most important thing in the world to be.
Mm-hmm.
But when you become an adult and the world is not easy and things are hard, you kind of wish that you failed a little bit more as a kid.
Yeah.
So that now you can manage that feeling of failure, because it's way harder to have that resilience when the things that matter are really, really difficult, to not have had practice when things were easy and been applauded for just coasting through.
Yeah. Because the narrow framework of doing well in school and then getting into a good college and thinking with that mentality that like, oh, I'm smart, I'm talented, I can do well, my success is inevitable.
Yeah.
Makes it very hard to deal with when the rest of the world doesn't fucking care.
Right. And it's frustrating because I think it suggests to other people that there's this sense of entitlement or arrogance on your part, when in fact, like the world was saying, nope, the world is your oyster. You got this. And it's like, I was given that narrative. I didn't create it when I was a kid, you know?
It's extra true for millennials because like we're going based on the rules of, the rules that don't exist anymore, of like an affordability of homes and well-paying jobs that is just not there for us.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a little too in the weeds.
Let's go back to the ranch.
I didn't know Bras had a sister. I think this is the first time she comes up.
I think this is, I think that's, I like that there's these little things that should, they feel that they should be important to Bras's character, but they're kind of not. Like the half sister shows up and that never comes up again because it's not important. It's literally there.
Oh no, his blood sister.
I know. No, I know I'm talking about the half sister that he resents his father for. Like that is literally there just to show why he resents his father, and she does not need to come back into the story. So I say later, I make a joke that this story would not pass the Bechdel test whatsoever. But to their credit, that's not what they're trying to do. They're not trying to make everyone a fully fledged character. This is essentially like the biography of Bras, just told in a very linearly way, right? Okay, so on the ranch, there is a kite at the bottom of page 117, and there is a narration box that says life was harmless at the ranch. And it killed me this time around because I remembered how Bras dies.
Yeah.
Because he dies by electrocution reaching that kite that gets caught in wires.
Like frayed power lines or something.
Yeah. And it's just like utterly great storytelling and foreshadowing because it's a kite in a blue sky. Life is harmless, but the kite is what ultimately kills him, or his reaching for the kite is what kills him.
Which reaching up to get something above him maybe means needing to grow. Get taller.
Yeah.
Interesting.
This chapter I also found interesting because there was that moment of kissing cousins under the tree.
Yeah.
Which what's your take on that before I say anything?
I mean, yeah, first reaction is always going to be like, ew, but they're kids. You know, when I was 4 years old, I had a crush on my cousin that was like 3 years older than me. And I was like, we're going to get married. Like, cause I don't know how shit works, you know, but So I get it. I mean, yeah, they're 11. They should probably know a little bit better, but like, also they're in Brazil. I don't know what it's like down there. Like, just I don't know. Like, the point is not like, oh, gross, these two children are being sexual with each other and they're related. No, that's not it. It's the experience of it. It's the like moment of feeling like interested enough to even try that is a moment of growth. It was just a sweet little thing that they shared that no one else has to know about, and he can enter into life now with a first step toward maturity, which again, when he dies, is like, okay, that's the end of his youthful innocence.
I was going to say, I think this reinforces what your theory is, that he's done with this stage. He's done being a child here because he gets this feeling of sexual excitement, of attraction towards women. And that really kind of is his motivation for a lot of the story, a lot of external validation from specifically women.
Yeah. Which even his father reinforces by always calling his Aurora his muse.
Yeah, that's true. And his father also reinforces it with the reveal that he has another family too. So,
yep.
So I was curious about your take on it, and I appreciate how nuanced it was, specifically because I'm going to be teaching a book to seniors next year called The God of Small Things. Have you read it?
Mm-hmm. I've heard of it.
It is, I forget where it takes place. I got to reread it over the summer so I could properly prepare, but I read it when I was in college, and it is about two siblings, not cousins, two siblings who are romantically involved. They start as children, and it has that feeling of like, oh, they're just coming of age. They're like figuring stuff out, different culture, different ideals and whatnot. But no, they commit to it, and they are truly in love with one another. And it is a beautiful romance story between them that really challenges those norms we have. Almost like holy, because they're in the middle of a traumatic event.
Oh, wow.
Their only means of connection is one another familially, and in that familial bond, they find this greater love. And so it challenges these ideals. So it's not saying that incest is okay in war or anything like that.
Right.
But it is challenging these ideas and norms that it's like, is it so wrong to find the peace that you need in these perhaps left of center ways? It's asking these questions that I think are big and important.
Yeah, I think people need to look beyond every piece of art or challenging story as some kind of endorsement of what the characters are doing.
Yeah.
Because that to me sounds more like kind of a tragedy of like, can you even imagine that? I mean, it's like Jaime and Cersei Lannister, that they've like, they've had other loves, but they're still in love with each other and they're twins. Yeah. And like, it's fucked up, but
it's
like,
almost beautiful.
But it's interesting. It's almost beautiful.
Right.
But it's the idea is more like challenging your thought. Like, what could go through somebody's mind that's in that situation? You know, because we don't think like that. Most of us don't. So anything that kind of just makes you think a little differently, not to say this, you should do this, but that ideas can just be bigger than you think.
Yeah.
I don't know. That sounds interesting. I hope that goes over well, and I hope the kids like grab onto that and engage with it thoughtfully, because I could see a lot of pushback, if not from them, from their parents.
Yeah. It's a good class. I trust them. We've already talked about challenging stuff when they were in 10th grade, not to this level, but I think it's going to be fun when we get to this level. And I already told my co-teacher that I wanted to do it, and she was like, "That's going to be tough. Let's do it." Like it'll be fun,
all right.
You know?
Cool.
All right, we're at the halfway point, and
I have to say something here.
Yeah.
So I know that these were 10 issues compiled into one graphic novel, but something about the insert art at the end of chapter 5 and then starting chapter 6, where it shows Bras typing alone at his desk, got me thinking, just the juxtaposition from like seeing this last image of the obituary for 11-year-old Bras and then cutting immediately to him in his 30s writing.
Yes.
invoked an image in my mind of, is he imagining these deaths? Like, is he going back through his life and writing imaginary obituaries for himself? Because I get that it's magical realism and you're not supposed to take it literally.
Yeah.
But since it's a framing device that clearly means or suggests something, it could be that he's writing these in his own mind because his job as an obituary writer has hardwired his brain to think in these terms, even when remembering the past and long after he's moved on from that job. I think I'm not sure that that's happening, but just the suggestion of it is interesting.
I appreciate your reading of it. The way it usually goes in graphic novels that are collected from single issues is that at the end of each issue, they'll show the cover of the next issue.
Of the next one, yeah.
Right. So I only took him at his desk writing with that faraway island and the cross on the island, just as this is the cover of chapter 6 of issue 6.
Right.
But I like the idea that maybe, you know, like I like you're saying, there's a suggestion of it. Like maybe that's true. Maybe he's writing all these imaginary obituaries about himself. Knowing how much he hates himself, I feel like not. Because I don't think he hates himself in a narcissistic way. I think he truly hates himself because of his familial relations and like kind of trying to live up to his father and fill his shoes and fill his meet his standards despite resenting him. I think he has a lot of personal issues that I don't even think he'd care enough to write about himself in that way. But again, I like the maybe of it. Like I can't say no entirely. You know what I mean?
Right.
Chapter 6 starts very similarly to chapter 1.
Yeah, it does.
It starts in the middle. It starts with a character that we don't know. It's a trucker who drains a glass and leaves to go back into his big rig.
At a bar.
Yeah.
Drains a glass at a bar, yeah.
And then it does the 1 month earlier thing, and it sets up the rest of the story. So in this chapter, Bros is 33. It is different than what's come before in those previous chapters, again, with that prologue, but it kind of like harkens back to the first one. So like we kind of know what's going on, but we're a little like left of center again. With his being a young adult, there's even beyond a young adult, because he is 33 now, he feels like he's entering that stage of life where he like starts to level out, and it's not like midlife crisis kind of stuff. It's more so like he's just bored. There's like a general malaise that he's settling into. So he goes to his job to do his obits, and he's going to have a lot today because there was a plane accident. And it's fiery. It's awful. It's terrifying. Reading the scene with the plane gave me like 9/11 vibes. Even though this came out 10 years after the fact, it was just very reminiscent of like civilians running in a city and trying to save and whatnot. So I think like I was like putting a lot of myself in it from the stuff I saw as a kid. I don't know how much they did of that being Brazilian, but Bros goes there because he's going to have to write all these obituaries for people that died. And he has this realization that Jorge was to have been there. And Jorge wasn't. And Jorge's not answering his phone. And Jorge doesn't answer his phone for a month, and he doesn't know what happens to him. What did you think happened to him?
I mean, the story is definitely making you think, oh, he must have been on that plane. And 93 people died, and some of the bodies are so burned that you can't even identify them.
Yeah.
So it kind of suggests, like, at first, or at least it wants you to think that Jorge was on the plane and he died, and that's why he's not answering his phone for a month. But it goes on for so long of Bros trying to reach him that you're like, maybe he's not dead, or else they would have wrapped this up by now.
Right.
You know? In the meantime, though, Bros has to do all these obituaries. And he really has to dig deep and honor the people that died and their families and do justice to them to help give them some closure, as they've lost loved ones in this horrible plane crash. And this challenges him and puts his talents and creativity to the test to help him find his true voice as a writer, even when the job had previously been a dead end one that stifled him creatively. And this starts to form the basis of his identity as a writer that he would take on to become a novelist. And this actually relates to something I just said in our last episode about how with social media, you know, we don't like doing it. We find it annoying and, you know, trend chasing and stuff. But when we can find things that make it enjoyable, whether it's a stupid skit or whatever that we feel like we can put ourselves into, that makes it fun. And then it becomes another art form. And this is what he had to do. And sometimes having a good motivating factor, like the desire to do justice to the memory of an accident victim or 100, can be exactly what you need to push yourself. And I know you have a lot to say about this feeling he's having of imposter syndrome, because all he can think about is Jorge as he's writing about all these other people.
Yeah.
And just imagining his friend dead, while his wife tells him that the obituaries are really good and he's getting praise from his boss and stuff that's turning out good, but he just feels like a fraud.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you think about that?
I think, again, they're nailing how it feels to be a writer. You're never going to get past the imposter syndrome kind of feeling, in the same way that they clearly depicted you writing in your head and then just transcribing later. You're never going to be happy with the work that you produce. And that's kind of something that you got to accept, even while everyone around you is saying, this is so good, this is this, this is this. You got to at some point just say thank you and move on and either accept it or just like somehow quiet the voice in your head. But that's never going to go anywhere. What messed me up more about this issue was the conversation between Bras and Jorge once Jorge finally contacts him after his month apart. He's apologetic and Jorge gives an explanation for what happens. And he says it really vaguely and like kind of menacingly at first. He goes, yeah, sorry about that, but I couldn't really deal with anything for a while. I was on the next flight, you know, I was already inside the plane when they took us out and we heard the news. I flipped out, man. It could have been me on that plane. And for what? No job is worth dying for. So I wondered, what is, right? I thought I had a great life, great job, fun with the chicks, but nothing in my life is extraordinary. Nothing in my life really matters. Life is too short, man. I've been wasting time. I can't go back to that life. I'm never coming back. And then he says, take care, do something with your life, something that matters. And he hangs up. I was haunted by that scene because, for one, we get this panel of Jorge looking down where he says, I've been wasting time. I can't go back to that life, which it sounds like he's reading a suicide letter. Yeah. Essentially, which like is really, really sad because we have not gotten a death by suicide from Bras, unless you want to make the argument about the ocean drowning, which we're not really sure about. It's supposed to be vague on purpose. Right. But this thing with Jorge is really dark, and it's way darker than anything that's come before.
And it's coming from a character that has been so carefree and always saying how good life is. Yeah. How he just marvels at the sunset in Salvador. Like, this was the guy that like kind of broke Bras out of his shell and helped him with like when he was when Bras was meeting Olinda and they were supposed to leave in a week. Right. He was like, or Bras was like, oh man, I can't miss this job interview for a girl. And Jorge's like, so you're going to miss the girl for a job interview?
Right. And so he kind of revisits it, saying that no job is worth dying for, reinforcing that idea, that question he asked before. And so this is what I was saying at the start of the episode, where existentialism to a certain point becomes nihilism. Yeah. Because Jorge is the example of that. Like, he is the one who lives life to the fullest. He's the one who takes pictures because he wants to remember the way life is and appreciate it and celebrate it in the moment and capture that moment. And then even he just goes too close to the void and has that one bad day, to call out your Killing Joke reference from before.
You. Yes.
And in that one bad day, we see how good of a friend Bras is. Yeah. And this is where I start to love Bras a little more. Yeah. I already did love him. I mostly loved Little Miracle Bras when he's 11 because he's just a kid. There's nothing not to love about him. He's so fun. Yeah. everything up until then, he was like kind of like a little sad sack, but like you felt a little sorry for him. You liked him in a pathetic kind of way.
Yeah.
Here he's really like, he's being more actionable. And by being more active and showing that he's a friend who cares about Jorge, he gets on the road. He's driving out to go see Jorge, and it's dark. And the lights are shining. And then there's a truck. And we come back to the trucker at the beginning of the issue. And the minute we come back to that character, oh my God, those 3 panels kill me. The trucker's driving, and he's leaning over, and he's kind of squinting. And it says, "And you've always got my back." And this is Brass's inner monologue. "I take good care of you, and you take care of me." And his eyes close a little more. "You're my best friend." The eyes close all the way. And the next one is, "You never let me down," as the truck veers on the highway, ultimately causing a car crash that is going to kill Brass on the way to make sure his friend Jorge is okay.
Yep.
And that's the end of issue 6. He dies at 33.
Yep. So what does that mark the end of? His passivity as an obit writer that has nothing to say, and as someone who's not just going to let his friend go off, like he's going to take action to find and care for the people he loves. I mean, there's a lot there.
I think you hit the nail on the head, because Jorge says to him on the phone, "Do something with your life that matters." So something that matters to Brass is making sure that his friend Jorge is okay.
Yeah.
And that's what he does. And he gets in the car and goes, and it just so happens he dies. But that's okay. He has to die. We know he has to die.
Yeah.
Because we're at the end of the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. Chapter 7, he's 38. So with him being 38, we know that he got to Jorge.
Yeah.
We know that they reconnected because 5 years have passed in this interim.
Mm-hmm.
And it is on this plane to Jorge where he has achieved his novelist dreams.
Yeah.
Kind of in the anti-way of Chapter 4's 41, where he is the acclaimed novelist. And he did it mostly for his dad. Now we get to kind of see him like revel in being the popular author.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts on this really upbeat vibe after the super downer ending of Chapter 6. We get the flashback between Jorge and Brass, where they're hanging out in college. They meet. We see how they click right away.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes back to Brass at 38. I love this use of flashback just because there's so many times we get it in TV. There's so many times we get it in movies and in books where it's like you might get like squiggly lines around the edges of the screen. You might get italics in prose.
Mm-hmm.
Here, Moon and Ba don't do that shit. There is just Brass in one panel looking a little tired, but happy at 38.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Brass, young.
Yep.
And we're in flashback. And it's just
18
for like
years old.
like
and
a
he's
page.
He's meeting Jorge, and he doesn't have the long hair or the beard yet. So it's just seeing them as like kids and like, them connecting and hitting it off right away. Yeah.
And it's so informal in the way that they structure it, because we get that page, we get a panel on the next one where Jorge really, really does the worst foreshadowing. I think even worse than the kite, where he goes, "If it weren't for people, life would be a fucking desert. Cheers." And they cheers to it.
Oh my God.
And it's awful foreshadowing, because that's where Jorge and Brass reconnect later in the sand dunes.
Yeah. And how he gets there is interesting, because I don't know if he ever did actually find Jorge 5 years before, because his wife tells him that when he finally gets the postcard from Jorge saying, "I can't do this without you." I think that's what he wrote, right?
Yeah.
His wife is objecting to Brass wanting to go find him, because she's like, he's been gone all this time. If he wanted to be found, he would. And Brass can't let that go. He's like, no, this is him saying he wants to be found. And so he does it. He goes again to look for his friend, and he goes, I think, back to Salvador, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just so glad he doesn't like run into Olinda there, because I feel like that would have been really cheesy.
Yeah.
And like, oh, what are the chances? Well, what have you been up to? Like, that just kind of would have wasted time and taken us off the pace of the story. Like, his and Olinda's lives have separated completely at this point. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Let's just move on. Instead, he goes to a hotel where he finds the daughter of the innkeeper.
Yep.
Who says that basically Jorge was wasting away there, and when he couldn't pay anymore and turned down a job, he had to be kicked out. And now he's like out in the wilderness. He's just gone. And I think she sent the postcards on his behalf or something, because he's been writing them constantly, just sitting at the hotel bar or something. And there's just this great moment where, I think it's page 168, where the woman asks him, what are you going to do when you find him, or if you find him?
Yeah.
And Bras doesn't answer. You just see a panel of him not saying anything, and then he walks off into the desert.
Yep.
I love that. Like, he doesn't know. He doesn't know what to do. He's got to see how his friend is before he knows what to do.
And it's also not about what he has to do. It's more about he just has to see him.
Yeah.
Maybe there is nothing that he can do, but he just has to see him.
Mm-hmm.
Because as far as we know, the last time they spoke, Jorge has become a broken man.
Yeah.
And like the daughter recognizes in him, Bras is a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just doing what a good friend would do, and he's going to check up on him. And he is humming to himself in this hut. And he says, I knew you'd come. Did you get your postcards? Did you get my postcards? I wrote you all the time. And Bras says, yeah, I got them. You know, it's time to go back.
Mm-hmm.
Really being gentle with him. And Jorge says it's too late for it because there's a storm coming,
mm-hmm.
which is awesome. Again, this needs to be a movie. This needs to be a series. Like, James Gunn is in charge of DC. He could clearly get something greenlit for like a Vertigo line. I would love to see some or lesser known like character actors in this, because this is like the best of The Last of Us. You know, like that kind of vibe would fit this series so well.
The first season.
Yeah, I haven't watched the second one, just like I haven't played the second game, because technically to me it's not canon. So
I say play the second game. Do not watch the second season. We could do a whole episode on that.
I don't know if I'd want to. I don't know if I'd want to.
I'd rather keep things positive, and I have a lot of positive things to say about the games and the first season of the show, and almost nothing positive to say about the second season. So let's just leave it at that.
So we find out that Jorge read his book, which I think is really, really sweet.
Yeah.
Because even though Jorge has become this broken person, he's still Bras's friend.
Yeah.
So there is that humanity left in him. He goes, I always knew you had it in you, in a panel where he is holding a shiv, which again is awful foreshadowing, because I always knew you had it in you, the ability to write a novel. And also, I always knew you had it in you, like the shiv in your side. And so he goes, life was good. And he's standing there really menacingly. And Bras is still there as his friend, like really trying to walk him back. And Jorge cuts himself right in front of him, which is utterly traumatic on both their ends.
Yeah.
And then with these awful eyes, with these like pinprick pupils, he says, hold still. And he just guts Bras in the middle of this storm. And then we get these interstitial flashback panels of the two of them where...
Oh, they're looking at the sunset.
This is where they break form, because in this moment, this is not Bras. These are Jorge's memories, because the camera's taking the pictures. And so with taking those pictures, this is from Jorge's point of view. And he says, forget about that dude. Try to live one day at a time and wait and see what comes next. And it's just Jorge stabbing him to pieces. Yeah. Why do you think Jorge did this?
He says something like, it'll all be over soon. I feel like, I mean, it's hard to know what's going through the mind of a broken person. But to me, it seems like he has come, like you've said, like stared too deep into the abyss and come out thinking life is pain, and that he's saving his friend by ending the misery for the both of them. That's how I take it. I guess to go along with my theory of what this ends for Bras, I think it just ends his life as Jorge's friend, because Jorge is gone.
Yeah. If I'm remembering correctly, we don't see Jorge again.
Yeah.
Outside of Dream.
Yeah. So I think this just is his death is canon and Bras's isn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is awfully sad, because you would think that the most positive and upbeat character in the series would be Brass's North Star, and he's not.
Yep.
He's just part of his story because death is always part of the story.
Mm.
Even with this being Jorge's end, so for us to take it as the canon of Daytripper, that Jorge kills himself as a recluse in the desert, still my favorite character.
Yeah.
He's still like, because it's just so hard to not empathize with him, because you're getting to the scene where he's committing this heinous violence and you are upset, but you feel bad for him nonetheless.
Yeah.
Because he's not doing it to be a murderer or to be foul or anything. Like you said, it might be some perverted way that he thinks he's saving Brass, but it's sad.
Cool. So chapter 8 is age 47. So speaking of good characters, I love this chapter because Brass isn't in it.
Yep.
This is all his family, and it gives us the chance to see all of them as people and how Brass touches their lives, but who they are. Not just as characters in support of him, but how they flip it and now see how Brass supports them as people.
Yes.
Like Anna, we had seen her before giving like a tour or something of some city before she sees the plane crash. Now, I believe from looking at her email at her office job, she works at an architecture firm. So that's cool. We're learning that Anna is an architect, or at least in that world. So now we learn a little bit more about her and see that that's a busy and demanding job and has to juggle a busy schedule to continue to care for Miguel while Brass is away, because now that he's a successful writer, he goes on book tours and he's away from home quite a bit. But all of it is worth it when she gets the sweet nothings, emails and messages and voicemails from Brass, just going out of his way to remind her that he loves her. And then Miguel, who's 6 years old now at this point, he idolizes his father and has trouble coping with his absence. So he does what any kid would do and make him larger than life.
Yeah.
Both in his mind and to the bullies who tell him his father doesn't want to be around him. That's a very human and very good. They're really good at capturing kids' minds in this book. And then there's Brass's mother, Aurora, who has kept Benedito's downstairs study in her house completely intact and untouched since his death 6 years ago. That tells us a lot.
Yeah.
It's very common for people who have lost loved ones that they want to preserve the memory. And we see how intact it is because Brass's book is still there.
Yep. Which, again, is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And hasn't been noted for a while now.
Yeah.
The book kind of like haunts the series because it shows up, but being on the desk is important, and it'll be important when we get to chapter 10.
Yeah. But also, I just had I was so sad when I realized their dog Dante is dead, the golden retriever.
Yeah.
And they don't make much of it. You hear like half a conversation of Anna talking to Brass on the phone about like thinking about getting a new dog, but death is part of life, and you're gonna lose your dog at some point, which I try not to think about, but that's part of life, and that might play into the end of this chapter too.
Brass dies off panel again because he doesn't even show up.
Mm-hmm.
And he dies from complications during a last-minute surgery to remove a tumor from his head, which is, again, foreshadowing for chapter 10 when he's 76. What really kills me about this chapter's ending isn't Brass's death, because we know he's going to die. It's more so seeing how his family deals with his death.
Yeah.
Anna struggles. She goes into her depressive feelings about it because she never really got to have any last moments with him, which is awful. Miguel is disappointed, of course, but he's holding the leash of a new dog, which is really, really sweet. That scene where they have each other and they have a dog. And granted, that's not going to replace Dante. It's not going to replace Brass. But neither of them feel like people that would use an animal or anything to replace in grief. rather just it'll help. It'll support. And it's just they have all this love to give to Brass, and he's not there to receive it anymore, but they have the dog.
Yeah.
So this one hits me as like a damn, like I want to cry, but kind of in a happy way.
Yeah. Which they kind of do at the end. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like they embrace. And again, we get the obituary. He dies. And it's like, you're not happy he's dead, but you're happy that they have one another and they have such a strong bond and relationship that, yeah, their patriarch is dead, but they'll be fine. They'll be okay because they got each other. They got that love. Okay. Chapter 9 is weird.
Yeah.
It is Moon and Ba telling the audience, hey, you know the end is coming. You think we got all our tricks done? Nope.
Yep.
And goes full magical realism.
Full Slaughterhouse 5, like non-chronological fever dream in and out of memories thing.
I don't get that reference because I got to read that book. So
basically the main character in that is like, he calls it being unstuck in time because he thinks he was, and maybe he was, abducted by aliens that teach him to see through time. So he's like, his memories kind of interweave with each other.
Gotcha.
And he's almost like interacting as his future self in the past. I think it might be kind of a play on Alzheimer's, which this might also be. But it's very interesting, and it's that whole non-chronological thing. You're not sure where story beats line up, like where he is in time at this moment, etc.
Right.
Yeah, it's like a less snarky version of Vonnegut thing, basically.
Gotcha. Okay. So Brass is on the boat with Yamanha.
Mm-hmm.
And they're having a conversation this time. So right away, you're like, what the hell is going on? And we get the then he woke up panel at the end of the first page, which typically would be annoying. But then when you turn the page, you're like, okay, dreams happen. We're up to like middle-aged Brass. But Anna is kind of rude to him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's weird because, yeah, there can be tension in their relationship, but ultimately it is based out of love.
Yeah.
But she says, you finally decided to wake up. And he goes, I got lost in my dreams, I guess. They kept calling me. I could have stayed there forever. And she leaves him and walks away from his affection.
Mm-hmm.
I could barely sleep. Miguel was restless. And Brass says he had a dream a long time ago. And Anna looks at him with such anger, which is confusing. And it's the bottom panel of that page. So you got to do a page turn. And in that page turn, we enter the scene where they kind of have this semi-argument where Anna's pushing him to be more active at home. And Brass is really resistant. And slowly but surely, the house fills up with water from the sink.
Yeah.
And that's where we enter this idea of like, oh, this isn't real again.
Yeah.
And Dante talks and he goes, what do you think you're doing? And it's another end of page panel where you turn it and you see Brass waking up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, granted, we don't have the title of dream yet, but we know that this is Brass sleeping. And every scene he's going to be sleeping in the way that at the end of every issue previously he dies. When the scene gets too weird, because we know how these characters are supposed to act, Brass is going to wake up and be in the next stage of his life, wherever it might be. Because it sounds like your narrator from Slaughterhouse 5, he's recursively going through time in his dreams, which get more and more surreal. It's kind of like a clip show in a sitcom before the series finale, which I like. I thought it was like a fun little trick to do because you're just getting all of these thematic reinforcements throughout it. There's this crossover in his dreams where he's talking to a woman who wants to get a signature for Silken Eyes, but this isn't that Brass yet. He's still the obituary writer.
Yeah, he like just started writing the obituaries at this point.
And he sees his name on the book and he's very confused by it. But we're also hearing about Jorge and the plane on the TV at the same time. So he's going through something. This might be me just coming off of watching Jacob's Ladder, but this gives like Death Dream vibes, where maybe at any point in the series where he was falling asleep and he dies, or just before he dies, maybe he's bleeding out in the desert from Jorge stabbing him. He's jumping through his life and just getting all of these like moments that matter before it all ends.
Yeah.
So he wakes up on the plane now, and he's middle-aged Brass. He's the acclaimed novelist holding his novel, And Jorge, who he's going to see, is in the seat over there. And he goes, you read like 2 paragraphs and already fell asleep. Your book must be boring. It's funny. Like we got that tongue-in-cheek levity, even though we're like, this is weird. Even for Daytripper, this is weird.
Yeah.
But it flies. It's just easy to read because you're like, yep, I'm with you. Just tell us where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
We get them to the desert, and Jorge, again, he's so good. Bras is just walking. It looks like he's about to walk off a cliff. Jorge goes, where do you think you're going? You can't just run away. You know, it's never that easy.
Mm-hmm.
You have a decision to make about what? And Jorge goes, I think you know. And he points up to the kite that was flying from when he's 11. But Jorge's going into the desert because Jorge makes the decision to stare into the abyss.
Yeah.
But he keeps Bras on the ledge because Jorge's a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps going. We get little Miguel. Yes, right? That is Miguel.
Yeah.
But it's also... okay.
Okay, this is cool because it starts with like little Bras running with the kite.
Yes.
And then in the next panel, he becomes older Bras again. And then he gets to that tree on the ranch and he sees his father and his son sitting together. And they've never met.
No.
Because he died on the day Miguel was born.
Right.
So now there's this beautiful moment of them meeting. And Miguel, I think, says something like, Grandpa said you're going to tell me a story.
I think this might have been one of my favorite scenes in the book because it reinforces that paternal connection through generations because we don't get to have that previously.
Yeah.
And they give us just enough of it that it doesn't get cheesy, but that there is this through line from Benedito through Bras to Miguel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just sweet because Benedito talks to Bras and he says, do you want to keep dreaming?
Mm-hmm.
And we know that he means that literally because we're the ones reading the book. But he also means that Bras as in, are you going to keep kind of meandering through your life? Or are you going to make a decision and stick to it? And that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Bras goes, do I have a choice? And Benedito offers him a cigarette with the kite flying in the background. You always have a choice. Bras goes, so what now? And Benedito goes, well, just picture where you want to be. And we get to flip on the page and read the story until the end. And it is Bras as an older man, sickly, because he's got an IV drip.
Mm-hmm.
He's wearing an oxygen mask, but he goes to the beach and he starts typing. And this is where we get his official obituary about himself because he does it in first person. He says, my name is Bras de Oliva Dominguez and I'm a dreamer. So that is what he does. Yeah. In the way that Jorge takes pictures, Bras dreams.
Mm-hmm.
In this kind of non sequitur of a chapter, we get so much about Bras's character because he finally settles on who he is and he kind of accepts, like, I'm the person that meanders through life because that is what I do. I dream.
Yeah.
Which is nice, but it sucks that it took him to this age to realize it.
Mm-hmm. And I think if you want to get literal with it, it could call into question, like, has he been dreaming this whole time? Was he dreaming of imaginary deaths placed into real events from his past because he knows he's going to die soon? Is this all because the tumors in his head are giving him Alzheimer's? Like, what exactly is happening? But it kind of doesn't matter because the point is the dream. Yep.
So chapter 9 ends kind of breaking the fourth wall.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, but not really. But like, it goes both ways because like it's fluid. Again, they're like, it's kind of Lynchian in the way that they do it. My name is Bras de Oliva Dominguez, and he's got the cigarette smoking, but he's not sitting at the chair. This is the story of my life, which we as the audience finally realize. And take a deep breath, open your eyes, and close the book, which is an awesome way to end chapter 9.
Mm-hmm.
And for Moon and Ba to say, okay, we're at the end.
Also, quick thing.
Yeah.
Chapter 9 is the only one, or maybe the first one, but I think the only one, where Bras doesn't die. He writes his obituary, but we don't see him die.
I'm going to challenge that a little bit.
Okay.
We don't see him die, but we know that he is dying.
Yes.
Because he's on the drip and he's on oxygen.
Yes.
And his father told him to picture where you want to be when the story ends.
Mm-hmm.
Which foreshadows all of chapter 10.
Yeah.
So we don't see him die, but we do see him disappear.
Mm-hmm.
He is there in one panel where he sits there and he starts to write it. He taps his cigarette and leaves it in the dish, and then the chair is empty.
Mm-hmm.
So while we don't see him die, I think he does die.
Oh, okay then.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, again, this is open to interpretation because, like, I see the point that you're making that, like, this is Moon and Boss saying he's not dying in it. But his dad says in this dream message to him, picture where you want to be. And he chooses to picture himself as an old man who is dying. But he's writing on the beach and he writes his own obituary. And after he finishes his obituary, he goes, take a deep breath and close the book. And closing the book is the equivalent of dying for Brass and Benedito. So with that empty chair, I think he does die in chapter 9. But perhaps it is not a literal death in the way that it has been previously, if that makes sense.
Yeah, which I think makes it more real.
Yes.
Because when all of these explicit deaths keep happening and we accept that we're going to see another chapter of his life, so it's fine. Now that you've broken it up and it's not clear anymore, it makes the question of it mean something more, because we're getting to an age where he could die and he's in a state where he looks like he's going to die.
Yeah.
Now we really have to sit with it and accept he's actually going to die this time.
Right. And we know he's actually going to die this time because it opens up on his miracle birth in chapter 10. And it says in that first panel, 76 years ago. So we know that this chapter is going to be 76.
Yes.
Which is a natural age to die.
Right.
So Brass is going to die. He's going to die at 76. But we get to see the birth. We get those awesome 2 pages of just some short dialogue on these pitch black panels of Brass's actual birth, which is so fun. But I imagine the brothers, when they were writing this, they were like, thank God. Here's 2 pages that we don't have to do a damn
don't have to
thing
draw
for.
anything.
Yeah. And again, the seamless segue and pacing from Brass's birth in the dark to his death in the light. The doctor says, let me show you. Click. And the click is the doctor showing a 76-year-old Brass masses in his head. So all these brain tumors, and Brass being the older man who has come to the realization that he is a dreamer. He's written his novel. He's had his son. He's lived his happy life with Anna. He's gotten through the tragedy of losing Jorge. He's come out of it in a peaceful way with all the resentment he had with Benedito because he made peace with him in his dreams in the last chapter. And Brass accepts that he's going to die because he doesn't want to do the treatments again.
Yep.
And it is such a sweet moment that I wasn't even sad upon reading it.
Yeah.
Not really in a way of like dissociating from it or being detached from it. Just like, no, Brass is good. Like, yeah, this is a happy death, which is very, very odd because most of them, if not all, have been utterly tragic and sad. But this death is going to be a good one because it's okay to end the story because we got so much of the story.
Yeah.
So Brass kind of thinks about home. He's reflective. He gets to Anna and he tells her that he's not going through any more treatment. It's over. I'm done. And her reaction is some of the most beautiful, like some of the most beautiful, like couple romantic love interactions I've seen, because she just looks at him with such love and has tears in her eyes and says, I love you so much. She doesn't fight him, which could have been the easy way out. That could have been the conflict of this issue, is the two of them fighting about him staying on. But she recognized that he's ready to die.
Yeah.
And seeing this acceptance in him, she's like, wow, he's a changed man. He's at this next stage of life, which just so happens to be the last. But he's at peace with it, which he has not been at peace with it for the remainder of the series. Then he meets Miguel. What did you think of Miguel?
I love that he looks like Brass, but fat, because it just makes him stand out instead of just being another character that looks like Brass, because you can see the similarity from Benedito to Brass. I like that Miguel has a different body shape because he's his own person, and now he's a father and he's got a wife and kids back home. Like he's done quite a bit with his life and built something for himself. So we can see how proud Bras is to have raised a son that he loves and respects.
To put some character stuff on here and going beyond the poet made the curtains blue because the curtains are blue, but they're actually sad.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think Miguel's being fat suggests he's happy.
Yeah, I think so too.
Right? In a way that Bras was skinny and gaunt and smoked cigarettes and drank black coffee.
Yeah.
Because he was unhappy with himself. Whereas Miguel's fine.
Yeah.
He's okay, right? And so he's happy. He's okay. So Miguel's on his way out because he has to go home. And on his way out, he delivers a letter to Bras. Oh, I almost forgot, he says. I was packing Grandpa's stuff from his old studio. And remember that copy of your first novel that's always been on his desk? Bras is like a full-blown novelist if that's just his first novel. So he's truly done it.
Yeah.
Miguel says, well, I opened it and there was an envelope inside. Addressed to you, Dad. Bras looks at it and says, to my son, Bras. And he gives Miguel the biggest hug.
Mm-hmm.
Tells him he's proud of him. And Miguel walks away. Miguel not knowing that this is the last time he's going to see his father alive.
Yeah.
But Bras knowing it's the last time he's seeing his son.
Yeah.
That scene on several levels was gutting to me because it tells me that Benedito read the novel,
mm-hmm.
which suggests he's proud of Bras. He just never communicated it to him, or at least not yet.
Mm-hmm.
But there is that acknowledgement that Bras was looking for in chapter 1, where he wanted his father to say happy birthday and he didn't. Well, now he's getting this whole damn letter from his dad from years ago. And it's just going to validate the hell out of his experience, even though he's kind of okay already because he already did this with his dad in his dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of verifying it. So he goes to the beach, sits with the letter, and the major message of Benedito's letter to Bras is that now that Bras is a father, he no longer can be selfish in his life.
Yeah.
Benedito says the baby is the new master of your life. He is the sole reason for your existence. You'll surrender your life to him and give him your heart and soul because you want him to be strong, to be brave enough to make all his decisions without you. So when he finally grows older, he won't need you.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what Benedito struggles with Bras, unbeknownst to Bras when he's younger.
Yeah.
Which makes it all the more tragic that you're not in Benedito's head. You only get Bras's picture of him, which is full of resentment and anger.
Mm-hmm.
Benedito also says, and this is what probably hit me harder than that message about being a father to a child. He goes, only when you accept that one day you'll die can you let go and make the best out of life. And that's the big secret. That's the miracle.
Yeah. So that stood out to me too, because I think this works in a few ways. Like something I took from it was, I think his father's saying here that yes, Bras was a miracle child, but not because he's particularly special, but because the circle of building a life for yourself that you can then share with your own children is the miracle itself. But again, it's that acceptance of death as the end of your life, but not the end of all life.
Right.
That it's continuing through your kids.
Right.
That's what makes it all miraculous, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's an awesome message, especially because you said at the beginning of our episode that this is a book that's about life, that pushes death in your face. Kind of unbeknownst to us, saying that the message is you got to get comfortable with death in order to enjoy life.
Right.
So we're just going to throw death in your face constantly, and it's going to be tragic and it's going to be harmful. But hopefully at some point you'll get the message that it's a part of the story. You got to accept it. And when you accept it, that's when you can get the beauty. And we get the beauty in this last chapter. We get Bras kiss Anna on the head and says, don't wait up. He just wants to go get some night air. We know he's dying.
Yeah.
We know he's saying goodbye to her. She knows he's saying goodbye to her.
Mm-hmm.
But she just lets him do it. Only when you accept that one day you'll die can you let go and make the best out of life. And he's got the flowers, and Bras throws the flowers into the water. And we get these little flashes. We see a star up in the sky, which maybe that's the kite that hit the power line earlier, but Bras doesn't reach up now because he doesn't need to.
Mm-hmm.
We get the flash of Anna in the bed, who's smiling with the glasses on the table. And then we get what I think is the most anticlimactic ending
Yeah.
of the entire series, but it works so beautifully that he's standing in the water, not dead,
No.
but he's just understanding that Miguel doesn't need him anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So even though he's not dead, he's ready to die and it's about to happen. We don't need to see it because he's going to die.
Yep.
He'll be okay. Anna will be okay. Miguel will be okay. Everyone's fine.
Yeah. Just the image of him standing in the water, almost looking like he's going to walk out and drown himself, but we don't see him do that.
Yeah.
I think that says enough that he's accepting.
Yeah. Do you think he kills himself?
No, I think the image is enough, you know. Plus, like, he's not in serious pain. Like his doctor says, like, the headaches will just get worse. And he's like, you said that 30 years ago, Doc.
Yeah.
He seems okay. It doesn't seem like he's going to put himself out of his misery. I think we just know, because like you said, that if this is the only chapter where we don't see him die, that ironically is showing us that he's actually dead now.
Yeah.
You know, because it's the only time we don't see it. The image reminds me of the end of the movie Submarine. Have you ever seen that?
I have not seen it, no.
Great movie. I won't spoil anything, but there is kind of a symbolic walk into the water, not an actual attempt or anything, a suicide attempt, but like that image of just walking out on the beach into the water. It's charged. Yeah, I think it's just a visual way of showing that he accepts his death.
Mm. In my headcanon of the story, I imagine that he died in his sleep.
Yeah.
I imagine that he died in his sleep next to Anna, and in his head, he kisses her. And in his head, he goes out, grabs the flowers, and goes out into the water. But I just get the feeling that he falls asleep and dies.
Yeah.
Like probably in the most comfortable, and again, anticlimactic way, because we already got all the awful ways that he could have died for 8 chapters.
Who's kept appearing in his dreams? Yamana.
Right.
You know, who's in the water.
Right. Do you see why this is my favorite graphic novel?
I definitely see it. Yeah.
Like it just hits on so many levels. It hits on the structural level. It hits on the thematic level. It hits in the way it's drawn. It hits in the dialogue, the narration, just everything about it.
Mm-hmm.
It feels masterful, and it feels like I could teach a class on it. It feels like I can go take a class on it.
Mm-hmm.
And despite all of the depth that we have in it, I feel like I can go up to one of my students and be like, hey, read this. I think you'll like it. And they don't need to have ever read a comic before because it's so accessible that they'll get something out of it. Anyone will get something out of it. Man, I just love this book. I just love this book so much.
Yeah, thank you again for the copy, because this was very special. And, you know, just from the title, I didn't even know what to think. Like, I got halfway through reading it and was like, what's this called again? And so, like, turned the cover back over, saw it was Daytripper. I was like, huh. There are no Beatles references in this book. Yeah. And then I go, and then it all starts to make sense once the dream really solidifies. You know, once you really see that that's what it's all about, is the dreaming, and that he's dreaming his way through life. I don't know. It's one of those books that just makes you think and makes you appreciate life and appreciate creativity, whether it's your own or how other people express theirs. Great pick. I really loved it.
Nice. Glad you enjoyed it. I don't know when I can next read this book again because it's so heavy, but it definitely makes me want to like sit down and write.
Yeah.
And make stuff and do stuff, which is really, really good, especially on this go around. Because I think I felt like this the first time I read it, but I was more so in awe and I didn't engage on critical level the way we did, so I appreciate that. So thank you for giving me the space to do it.
Sure.
Because now this makes me want to go figure out how I can be recursive in my own writing. How can I reference this and make it feel like a dream, but it's actually kind of real, and it's actually very real when you come to the message I'm trying to convey, regardless of whatever is happening in the plot, because that's not ultimately what matters.
Yeah.
Whew. Any final thoughts on Daytripper?
I don't know. What's a good, like, pick-me-up palate cleanser? What are we going to talk about next, actually?
I don't know. Vince is supposed to tell us. So when he listens to this is going to be his way of getting guilted into texting us morning of when he listens to it on his commute to work. But I think
Hi, Vince.
I think in the lead up to our unannounced LVP thing that we're doing, we'll have a mini series that reflects our life and our bandmates and collaborators, special interests.
Oh, yeah. I like that approach.
As specific as I want to be, I guess, right now. Thank you for listening. Go do something with your life that matters.
Aw.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Filler. If you liked what you heard, please rate and review this episode to help others find it. For more recommendations and explorations of media we love, go to afterschoolspecial.xyz. Follow Filler on Blue Sky and email us at fillerpod@gmail.com. See you next time.